So for this month's bonus content for Science of Rowing, I'm very pleased to be able to sit down and have back on as a guest Aifric Keogh from Rowing Ireland, Olympic Bronze Medalist from the women's 4. And she is going to be joining us this afternoon to discuss iron supplementation. Aifric, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on.
No problem. Thanks for having me back.
Awesome. So just let's start with your personal backstory and your experience. How did you first come to find out that you were iron deficient?
I guess, like, thinking back, it was probably when I was in secondary school, and I remember just going to my GP and having my bloods done routinely. I can't remember if there was a specific reason why, but yeah, I remember getting my bloods done and my GP just saying, "Oh, you're quite low on iron, but not to worry. You know, that's quite common, quite a common problem, especially, you know." I was a teenage girl, and that was something that he'd seen obviously a lot, and he just said, you know, start taking a supplement and you'll be fine. And I think as well, I would have been quite aware of it because it was something my sister she had low iron as well. And, you know, at the time she was kind of saying this telltale signs that, you know, if you're fatigued a lot, I think something like if the inner of your eye is quite white, if you're pale, like there was a few little signs that she had heard. I'm not quite sure if there's any scientific evidence to support that, but that's what she used to say to me anyway. So I remember she used to say, yeah, you look like you're iron deficient. And I'd be like, okay, probably wasn't even aware of what that meant at the time. So I think, you know, the advice was go get a supplement and, you know, you'll be fine. That will help you. But and again, through my sister, like, I know she would have had a lot of trouble with iron supplements. She used to suffer from kind of constipation a lot when she'd be on them. And I remember kind of just picking it up and probably took it for a week or two and probably fell off it quite quickly. I remember kind of coming into my exam years in school, like struggling a lot, trying to stay focused, going to school, training, coming home, sitting at a desk. And there'd be a couple of times my parents would like walk in, I'd just be head down on the desk asleep. And just because I just couldn't focus. Now, like, having said that, they are quite long, challenging days that like secondary school students would go through, like sport aside, you know, there is a lot of work involved. And I just remember like really struggling to kind of stay focused for the entire day and really struggling with that fatigue side of things.
Wow. So how did that experience also impact your performance and training when it came to rowing? Like, what were some of the things that you realized were having a detrimental effect for you?
To be honest, I probably didn't link it to my training until much later on when I was down training in the high performance group in Cork. I just like didn't make the link. No one ever made that link for me. I just wasn't aware that the impacts that could have. And it was only when we started getting kind of routine blood testing done, and because we're just very competitive people, we got to the point where we're almost like competing against, well, what's your level of this? What's your level of that? You know, we actually used to kind of make a competition of how much vitamin D everyone had, how much ferritin, how much hemoglobin. Like, yeah, we're just, and I think our competitive nature just went a bit too far in that sense. But so I think, yeah, like it was just really kind of really obvious. You know, when I could see my ferritin levels, my hemoglobin levels compared to the other girls, like I was very, very deficient in those. And I think that's kind of really what you know, I suppose woke me up. Like, you know, the previous GP had said to me not to worry, it's a common problem. So I didn't really worry, but it was only when I saw the levels of the other athletes, and then when I would say my level, it was like the reaction of like, oh God, you know, that's quite low. And then when our nutritionist and our team doctor, Sharon, who was on the last call with me, and George Fuller, like they said, yeah, no, look, that's that's quite low for someone who's just trying to go about a normal day, not to mind an athlete who's training, 4 or 5 hours a day on top of a working day. Like, that's just not sustainable. It's going to lead to injury, it's going to lead to illness, and it's something that I really needed to get on top of.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have for you is, when you were having those conversations with Sharon, did they, or did she discuss with you the impact of, because you had a higher training load, you were much more physically active than sort of your normal everyday female, how that would be even more, detrimental to both health and performance? Was that some of the conversations you had around the iron deficiency?
Yeah, I think, like, obviously as athletes, you're constantly putting yourself in a hole of fatigue, but then, like, there's obviously a line you're going to cross, and it's how well you, I suppose, bounce back from that fatigue, and how, like, is there a point in a session where you're starting off fatigued rather than, okay, maybe 10K, 12K in, you're starting to hit that wall. Whereas I think for me, I was just fatiguing a lot earlier. It was taking, the week itself was taking a lot out of me. And, when I suppose when you're an up and coming athlete at the time, you're putting that down to fitness, experience. The first thing you're not going to say, oh, it's my iron levels, to my coach,
Yeah.
or something like that. Like, that's not really something that you're going to think about. And I suppose it's only when you really start to see the different levels of ferritin and hemoglobin across a group of athletes who are doing the same program, who have the same experience, that maybe you might start to think, okay, maybe there is something more to this, and that it is all linked to the iron. Now, obviously, having said that, the performance of an athlete is not just one thing. It is all linked. It all contributes in a good way and a bad way. And I think, I think I've said this before, like, we spend so much time focused on our training and our technique that sometimes we kind of neglect, nutrition, sleep, and supplementation of not just iron, like, a whole range of things. And I think it's about, putting that whole puzzle together, and just, looking after those small little pieces at the end of the day, which we have the power to do, but some people just kind of seem to neglect through awareness, or just, may have kind of, I suppose, forgot, like, they might just get caught up in the training and other things like that would take priority.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what was some of the strategies? So you had that conversation, realizing that this is a bit of a red flag situation. We need to take action here. So what were sort of the next steps after that?
So I think obviously the first step was to start supplementing, and but also, I had to really take a look at my diet as well. And I think, kind of like a training routine, I had to really get into the routine of making sure that I had some iron rich foods in my diets regularly and consistently. I went as far as I was going up to a butcher and getting some liver and trying to cook that, and trying as many combinations of, like, baked beans, ketchup. I was getting so many recommendations from people saying, oh, because obviously it's not to everyone's taste, and it's something that, like, I tried every combination to try and make it edible, and there was days where it was on the plate and I was like, I just can't eat this liver, like, it's just not worth it for me. Was looking at kind of pate, like really like liver based foods, to really try kind of come at it at every angle. So obviously there was the diet side of it, and then I started supplementing, started taking just like a generic iron supplement that you can get in your pharmacy. But my problem was I was really experiencing a lot of side effects with it, and I actually didn't realize, like, what was wrong with me at the time. And I remember there was one distinct trial that I kind of woke up. I remember the day before I wasn't feeling well, and I was like, oh God, I'm racing tomorrow, and I just really wasn't feeling well. And I still distinctly remember taking an iron tablet, not linking it, took another iron tablet, went to bed, woke up, and I was so unwell. I was just nauseous, I was fainting, and I was like, I'm not going to make this trial. And I remember there were other people in the house at the time who were down for the trial, and they went on ahead of me because I was like, I can't leave the house. And thankfully, there was fog that morning, and that delayed the race. And if it was only for that delay, you know, by the time the race actually came around, I actually felt like I was able to perform. That I made it down to the rowing center and was able to compete in the trial. And I only kind of clicked then later on, like it was the iron tablet. Like I had just started different supplement that week, and that had just like totally just knocked my socks off and really put me in a position where I wasn't able to train or even compete. And I remember kind of saying to myself, okay, you know, on one side, I'm suffering with the fatigue of a low iron deficiency, but at the same time, I can get out of bed, I can go to training. Yes, I'm fatigued, but I can still do it. Then I start taking this supplement and I'm actually in a worse position. You know, like, is it really worth my while where I start supplementing this to get to this? You know, it seemed like such a high peak of I have to get up to the top of this mountain to get over this problem. I just didn't seem like an achievable goal for me. So, you know, I was sharing these concerns with Sharon and George, and we tried every method of, okay, a day on, a day off, or, you know, kind of space, maybe just take it every 3 days to see what I could tolerate. Because I obviously had to do something, and not taking the iron, just kind of the supplement at the time, just seemed like an easier option. I was like, look, I'll just have to rely on getting fitter and stronger with this deficiency rather than trying to solve it, because that was just, for me, that was just kind of, that was adding more of an obstacle for me, you know, with training, and it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I have to imagine that's particularly frustrating, being in that position where you're trying to do the right thing, and you know, you have that experience where it backfires basically, and
Yeah.
you're in a worse spot. Um, so appreciate you sharing that. So having gone through that experience, were there anything now, any things looking back on it that you realize that supplement compared to other supplements made it not as strong, or may have caused some of the issues that you were experiencing, not feeling well?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, it was just my lack of knowledge and awareness of like what happens when you take an iron supplement and what causes the kind of discomfort and symptoms. Like essentially, when you take an iron supplement, you're not absorbing all the iron in the supplement, depending on whatever dosage it is. And these high dosage, and at the time, okay, my levels are at this level, I need to get up, so I need to start taking a high dosage. Like there were days where I might take 2 supplements a day because I was like, I really need to kickstart this, need to get all the iron, as much iron as I can inside me. And I think that just, like, probably my own fault, like unaware of what I was doing. I was just loading iron into me, which obviously wasn't being absorbed. It was all just sitting in my stomach and causing all these all this discomfort. And I also wasn't aware that this was a common, you know, complaint of people who take iron supplements, and probably a common reason why people fall off supplementation, just because through those frustrations. And I suppose the same kind of challenge that I had is like, well, I'd rather feel tired than feel unwell, you know, like if you're going to weigh
Sure.
off those two options. So I remember again discussing with Sharon, this was back now maybe 2017, 18, around the kind of start of the cycle, I suppose, the Olympic cycle, that there was this new supplement coming out in the market called Active Iron, that, you know, their claim was they were kind and strong. And I think my problem though at the time was that they weren't batch tested. I wasn't actually able to take them just through kind of an anti-doping stance. You know, I had to make sure everything I was taking was batch tested and safe for consumption. Now, not that there is anything in Active Iron that and like there's no banned substances, but just to be sure that it wasn't contaminated or anything, I had to wait for that process. So they were busy launching their product, and, you know, kind of elite athletes is probably not the first thing on their list. Was like Sharon was putting pressure on them, like, we really need to get some batch tested. Like, I have, probably not just me, a list of athletes that, you know, need to get this product and need to get their hands on it as soon as possible. So I do remember waiting and waiting, and finally they got the clearance that they their product was batch tested, and I started to take that. And not only did I start to take it, I suppose I kind of was doing my own research as well and kind of figuring out. And I think a lot of people, when they heard the product and, you know, they say, oh, when they kind of see that it's kind of strong, they're like, oh, it's not as good as like another alternative, like the dosage is XYZ, you know, you need to get as much iron as possible. And I'm kind of thinking in my head, well, actually, you don't realize it's not all absorbed, you know, small things like that. And I think it's also the site of where the iron is released to be absorbed. Like active iron targets the small intestine, where it should be naturally absorbed anyway, and that's their kind of what makes them different, and that's what eases those symptoms, because it doesn't actually end up into your stomach where that causes that discomfort. So I mean, for me, for someone who couldn't actually physically take the other supplements, this was the game changer for me. This allowed me to kind of develop that consistent where I was able to take my supplement consistently and just, you know, build it into my everyday routine. And I didn't have to take any breaks. It wasn't a case of what I had been doing before, you know, take as much as I can. And then when I start to feel sick, take a few days off, you know, and play around with that. My only concern now was just the small things that everyone else would have to worry about. Take it with vitamin C. Don't take tea or coffee with it. You know, find that point in the day where it works for you, alongside obviously your diet that will support it. And that, yeah, like, to be honest, I haven't looked back since. Like, it has made such a difference for me personally.
Wow. So two quick questions just to follow up with what you just shared there. So one, why is it important to take or pair an iron supplement with vitamin C, and then versus coffee or tea? And then two, could you just go into a little bit more detail about, for anyone listening, why batch testing is important? I know that'll probably pertain more to the high performance athlete. But something to pay attention to in terms of just making sure supplements have been cleared.
Yeah. So why you avoid it with tea and coffee, I think, is the tannins in the tea and coffee. I'm not quite sure if that's the correct term, but there's a substance called tannins that prevent the absorption of iron. So, a common thing, which I also was probably doing initially, was, I wake up in the morning, have my breakfast, have my coffee, have my iron. But you're better off spacing that out maybe to the evening, where you're definitely not having kind of caffeine towards the later half of the day. That's for me now. I take my active iron in the evening times before bed, because I know I'm definitely hours out from the last coffee that I've had. So I'm not 100% sure on the exact science, but it's definitely the tannins in those substances. Also, calcium can prevent the absorption of iron as well. So if you were something I have to be mindful of, sometimes I would have a yogurt or something in the evening after dinner, and I just have to kind of be mindful of kind of the timing there as well, and make sure it's a couple of hours out from when I'm taking my supplement. Now, obviously, it's not going to be an exact science, and there's some days where you would overlook that, but just, I think, to be aware of it in case someone's kind of scratching their head being like, why is this not working for me? I'm having my iron every morning. Well, you're also having your coffee, so that could be a definite reason. Vitamin C, though, is something that can help the absorption of iron. So again, orange juice, something that can just, I actually don't enjoy orange juice that much. Forever away in camp, every morning people are straight over to the orange juice to have every morning or at lunchtime. But it's not something that I actually particularly enjoy, but it's just something now. I always have a carton of orange juice in the fridge just to have a tiny little mouthful with my active iron. And then the batch testing. So yeah, anti-doping. It's obviously, as a cardio athlete, I'm on the registered testing pool, where I can be tested whenever they see fit, really, if ever I get someone for a test. And as an athlete, WADA produce a list of banned substance every year, and you just kind of have to be aware of what's on that list. Now, if you're taking something and you're looking at the back and you see the ingredients and what exactly is in that supplement, let's say, none of those ingredients may be on the list, but what you can't be 100% sure of is whether they can get in as contaminants. And you see a lot of athletes who have tested positive. You know, they say, "Oh, I've never ever taken something, you know, on purpose with a banned substance. It must have been a contaminant in one of my substances." So, in order to kind of avoid that whole situation, a lot of supplements companies would have a range of batch tested products, so that it's each batch of what they produce is tested specifically against any of the contaminants that are on that list. So each active iron box has a batch, a serial number, and before I open any supplement, not just active iron, anything, I just take a quick photo of the batch number, so that touch wood, this isn't, if anything ever happened where my sample came back positive, I can say, well, these are the supplements I've taken, they're all batch tested, these are the batch numbers, and then they go back to the companies and they check within those specific batches if any of those contaminants had appeared within the testing. So it's kind of just like a safety net for athletes, you know, to be sure that what they're taking is definitely safe.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying those points. So what has made, so you touched on obviously the GI distress, and that was like one of the things that active iron was very different compared to the other experience you have with supplementation. But talk about from a performance standpoint. So you started supplementing. What were some of the benefits you started seeing in your training?
Well, I think, like, to be fair, for me, it's hard to pinpoint exactly. You know, I started taking active iron at a time where I started a new program. You know, obviously as an athlete, you want to be getting faster all the time, regardless of what you're taking and what you're doing. But the biggest thing I noticed was just kind of like, obviously everyone's fatigued, but I was able to work through that fatigue a lot more. I think I became a lot more efficient at, you know, the longer sessions, where before maybe halfway through I'd really start to struggle. Whereas I think I was just kind of prolonging that struggle and pushing through that struggle when it came, is probably the best way to describe it. You know, it's not a case where we're ever very truly comfortable out there on the water or on the machine, but I think it's just starting to kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable, was how I saw it. And I think then for the higher intensity pieces, that's something that I actually, as an athlete, would struggle with in general. I'm much more of an aerobic athlete rather than anaerobic. And I think kind of around this time every year, I'm kind of like, whereas most people are delighted to see the back of winter training, I'm the opposite. I'm like, oh God, it's the hard stuff's coming now. You know, it's the short and sharp stuff that I had kind of just, you know, in my head almost said, that's not you, that's not your strength, you know. Whereas I think when I started supplementing, and not only that, when I started seeing that, you know, my ferritin my stores were getting better, my ferritin was increasing through my bloods, my hemoglobin was increasing, that kind of gave me the confidence, okay, you know, you have what it takes inside you, just start using it. And I think that obviously, like, alongside like my increased fitness and obviously another year experience in the cycle, I definitely started to notice a difference in my performance at the high intensity.
Excellent. Yeah, so it was really interesting hearing that. So two points. One, from the journal I'm reviewing for this month's article. So your experience actually is very much in line and supports with the results and the findings of that. They had two groups of rowers, one iron deficient, non-anemic, and one with normal iron levels. And what they found is that the iron deficient who ended up supplementing, they did a baseline test at 6 weeks of supplementation and then another 4,000 meter test. That they were able to maintain the same workload at a lower energy cost. So they were expending less calories. And they started to produce less lactate. So again, right in line with some of your personal experience. So that's really, really cool to hear. So I guess final questions just to wrap up. So what, if you were to give advice to you know, fellow female athletes in regards to iron deficiency? What are just some things that they should be thinking about and considering and just be aware of?
Yeah, well, I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of the problem is awareness, that like a lot of athletes won't be aware that if they are deficient. And, ultimately, I'd say there's probably more people out there that are deficient than aren't. I think it's just, unfortunately, something that comes with being a female endurance athlete. And I think that obviously as well, a lot of athletes, they might not be living at home. They could be, in university, they could be cooking their own meals, like something. Having a diet that helps them can be quite a difficult thing. I know myself, it's, sometimes you come home for training and okay, today I was meant to have red meat, or I was meant to have XYZ, and you just kind of, the the laziness in you kicks in. But like trying to get a routine where your diet is varied and helps you. And then I honestly do think supplementation is key as well. And I think, unfortunately, if they are in a position where they can get like blood work done and they see their levels are quite low, it is an uphill battle. And I was actually speaking to someone earlier today, of asking them had they ever taken an iron supplement, and they said, oh, I took it for a week and I didn't notice anything, so I stopped. And I was kind of like laughing, like, well, first of all, it's going to take more than a week for you to feel a difference, and it's not like you're going to wake up, a month into supplementing saying, wow, I feel amazing. Like, it's not going to make you feel superhuman. It's going to be small things in sessions that you'll start to notice, or over a long period of time, you might say, oh, hey, I did this exact block last week, but I actually feel a bit better this week. And, your fitness obviously is going to be part of that too, but I definitely think the supplementation is definitely helpful. And unfortunately, I don't think it's okay, I'm deficient in iron, I'm going to take a supplement for 6-8 weeks. I do think it's a long-term thing. And I think it's something that people just need to get consistent with. And I definitely think it's worth bringing it into your routine. Like, if you're looking at what to change in your training or your nutrition, I think iron supplementation is definitely something that all athletes should be considering. There isn't a rower, I'd say, down in the NRC that isn't taking an iron supplement, to be honest. Like, I definitely think it's something that a lot of them are doing, and I definitely think it's something that's worthwhile as well, that they should consider.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aifric. Really enjoyed having you back on. Appreciate you making time. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.